Good morning, everyone. Take a deep breath in, if you will. If you'd like to play along with me. Gonna exhale with a tone that resembles your speaking voice. Shema Yisrael Asher Eloheinu Yahweh Echad. Good morning, Kimmy. How are you doing this morning? ואהבת את ענת אלוהיך ובכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודייך והיו הדברים האלה אשר נוחי מצווך היום על לבביך ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ולכתך בדרך ובשכבך ובקומך וקשרתם לאות על ידיך והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך. He has COVID. So you and your daughter and he are all in isolation? That sounds dreadful. Hi.
Just saying hello.
How did your meeting go?
It's good.
It was good? Okay. You can tell me about it later?
Yeah.
Maybe we'll just have another meeting. Bye. Good morning, Agagarat. Did you change your name? Well, I'm glad you're symptom-free. Yeah, that little DNA crystal, it impacts everyone differently. Symptoms are wide and diverse, and generally unpleasant. V'chaya, ki v'achayo Elohecha el ha'aretz asher nisba levatecha le'avram li'yitzchak u'Yaakov לתת לך עברים גדולות ודבות אשר לא בנית, ובתים מלאים כל טובה אשר לא מילאת, וברות הצופים אשר לא עשת, והכרמים וזיתים אשר לא נתת, והלכת ושבת. הישמר לך פן תשכח את יהוה אשר תישך, מארץ מצרים מבית עבדים. Hello from New Zealand. Welcome to this tiny little internet place that we make for ourselves. I'm glad you're here. Bits of plastic. So those were words from the book of Deuteronomy. Couldn't translate them as when Yahweh Eloheinu brings you into the land that he swore to your fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, to assign to you great and flourishing cities that we did not build, houses full of all good things that you did not fill, hewn cisterns that you did not hew, vineyards and olive groves that you did not plant, and you eat your fill. Take heed that you do not forget Yahweh, who freed you from the land of Egypt, the house of bondage. And I say those words every day because they are in the book of Deuteronomy, immediately afterwards, that I was taught from a very young age to say every day. Those words I didn't discover until more recently, and I find them very interesting. Perhaps because I also drink from cisterns that I did not hew, and I live in a house full of good things that I did not fill. Right? Like, I live on occupied land, and that prayer is a reminder of that. A reminder that all the good things we have are not necessarily earned or deserved, and there's pain associated with them, but we have them anyway, and we can appreciate them anyway. So, we're gonna continue on today, where we left off yesterday in the Baal cycle, right? And where we left off yesterday, it was a very climactic moment, where Baal is commanded to go down into the land of the dead, be consumed by the serpent of death. And before he does this, he mounts a cow and produces the next generation of divinity. He slept with her 77 times, it says. And then he dies, and all of the major deities, Anat and El and Ashra, they come to his body and they weep. Right? They rend their clothing. He covered his loins with a sackcloth. He cut his skin with a knife, right? Self-harm as grief, depicted in a 4,000-year-old text. It's very interesting. In any case, we will continue on and we will learn about the grieving rites of the gods, how they respond to the death of their king. Anat cut her skin with a knife. She made incisions with a razor. She cut her cheeks and chin. She raked her arms with a reed. She plowed her chest like a garden. She raked her back like a valley. Baal is dead. What will happen to the peoples? Dagon's son, what will happen to the masses? Let us go down to the earth in Baal's place. Sun, the god's torch, went down with her. When she had finished weeping, had drunk her tears like wine, she called to Sun, the god's torch, "Lift Baal the conqueror onto me." Sun, the god's torch, obeyed. She lifted up Baal the conqueror. She put him on Anat's shoulders. She brought him up to the peaks of Zaphon. She wept for him and buried him. She put him in a hole of the gods of the earth. She slaughtered 70 wild oxen as an oblation for Baal the conqueror.
How many oxen did you slaughter for me?
70.
What the fuck is my beef?
You got beef with me?
I'm gonna have beef with you later this week when I cook supper.
Okay. She slaughtered 70 wild oxen as an oblation for Baal the conqueror. She slaughtered 70 sheep as an oblation for Baal the conqueror. She slaughtered 70 plow oxen as an oblation for Baal the conqueror. She slaughtered 70 deer as an oblation for Baal the conqueror. She slaughtered 70 mountain goats as an oblation for Baal the conqueror. She slaughtered 70 asses as an oblation for Baal the conqueror. Then she headed towards El, at the source of the two rivers, in the midst of the two seas' pools. She opened El's tent and entered the shrine of the king, the father of time. At El's feet she bowed down and adored. She prostrated herself and worshipped him. She raised her voice and shouted, "Now let Ashra and her sons rejoice, the goddess and her pride of lions, for Baal has died, the prince, the lord of the earth, has perished." And we will conclude for now, right there, and we'll continue on tomorrow. And we will learn how the gods continue to respond to Baal's death. Why 70? Yes, there is significance to that number. I mean, you see a number of different permutations of it, but 7 was a holy number. That's why there's 7 days in a week, right? It likely comes from the fact that 7 is the largest prime number that goes into 28, right? So we noticed that the moon cycles were 28 days long, and 7 felt like a meaningful way to divide it up. we've inherited these sacred numbers from these old civilizations, right? The Babylonians used a base 12 system for counting things on a circle, right? And then we have these sevens. You see in the Bible a lot, you get sevens and you get 40s. And then there's this duplication and repetition pattern that we see here. So, right, in that earlier portion, when Baal is mounting the heifer at death's door, he slept with her 77 times, right? Again, 7 is a significant number, and then it just elevates it, right? He mounted her 88 times, right? And we're not supposed to interpret this as that he actually had sex 77 plus 88 times with this cow, right? Both of those numbers are metaphorical, right? 88 in regards to 77 is actually like one more unit of repetition, basically. So, elsewhere, just like earlier above on this page, take with you your 7 lads, your 8 noble boars, take with you Pidre made of light, take with you Tale made of rain, right? So they do 7 and then 8, because 8 is 1 more than 7. So you see that kind of numerical pattern a lot, and it would be mistaken to interpret it numerically. I mean, they're talking about numbers, but like it's poetry, right? So there's a lot and then more is really what they're saying. Yeah. Megan, that was from the Baal cycle. So the Baal cycle is a very old myth that was uncovered from an archaeological site from the city of Ugarit on the Mediterranean coast in what is now Syria, I believe, dated to around 4,000 years ago. So these are the stories that predate the Bible, predate the story of Exodus or Abraham, but nonetheless strongly inform those traditions. Yeah, because they come from the same place in the world. So, now we will say Arati. Do I have more? Oh, I have so much more, Megan. So we've been reading from this book for over a month now. Very slowly. I just do a page or two a day, because that's like it's poetry of a kind that is foreign to almost everyone because it's 4,000 years old. But it's also meant to be read in tiny little visual chunks like this. So I read a little bit every day, and when we finish the Baal cycle, we'll read another story. Like before that, we were reading about the. So Kimmy, you listened, you heard at least part of the descent of Ishtar, right? So we read this story about the descent of Ishtar, because she is resurrecting her husband who died at the gates of Ereshkigal. So we see this is literally the same story. Now we have a Nott going into the underworld to resurrect Baal. So Ishtar was a Sumerian goddess, right? Akkadian goddess, actually. So we're talking about modern day Iraq or Kuwait, even. Whereas Baal and Anat, they're on the other side of the Fertile Crescent. They're in Israel, basically, Syria, and so these were different countries that were mutually influencing each other, and they shared mythologies. Even the god names changed, the stories remain the same, right? And so that's, when I say here every day, like, okay, we're going to say all these different god names, right? And underneath all those god names is some sort of unitary single one thing, right? Like, I say that for metaphysical reasons, right? Like some kind of like theological, philosophical monotheism, like we are all one. But I also say that because, like, literally, you can look at these two stories and be like, clearly, obviously, these two stories descended from a common origin. Like, that's not up for debate, right? Like, that's not, like, they're the same story. They just have different phonemes being used. And so if we can recognize that our religious traditions all literally come from the same mimetic root, then maybe we can be nicer to one another. I don't know. Yeah. So anyway, that's why I'm going over these stories with you all. I think they're very important. I think after we do the Baal cycle, we will do the Enuma Elish, which is a little bit later story, a story about the founding of the city of Babylon. Yeah. So, Zach, I have a dumpster video in the works. I'm going to be editing it today. I finished my large 2-year-long documentary project about seeds. I finished it last week, and so I've returned to TikTok. I'm basically working on TikTok full time now. So you should expect content from me within a week or so. I won't start publishing until I have enough to start publishing on a regular rhythm. So I have to build up a little bit of a queue. But I'm editing it. I made Dumpster Guacamole on Friday, and I filmed it, and I'm going to be editing it today, and you will see a new Dumpster video very soon. I promise you. And I feel really relieved that I get to say that. Yeah. So, now let's say Arati. And once again, I'll repeat myself and say there are all of these stories, right? Like the first line in Arati evokes the god Ganesha. Right, here's Ganesha here. I've shown you this before. Right, so the story of Ganesh is that he had his head chopped off, and then he too needed to be resurrected, in this case by his father. Right, so all of these stories, they have the same motifs in them. Good morning, Walker. Yeah, a lot of what I'm saying comes from Joseph Campbell's work. Certainly my introduction to mythology, memetics, mythology history, just mythology in general, comes from Joseph Campbell, because he's written the most accessible stuff for a white American audience to ingest, to consume. Yeah, it's a good book. It's worth reading. So when I say Arati, I'm saying the names of all of these gods, and most of the stories I don't know. And certainly even the stories that I do know, I don't know them well enough to share them with you the way that I can share with you this story. But there are all of these stories that underlie these words, and yet you can also just interpret the words as words, right? They're just syllables, just speaking sounds, right? And the meaning of the sounds holistically, right? You can ignore every story, you can ignore every character, and you can understand that underneath it, the meaning of the sounds is that all of it is the same, right? No matter what kinds of variations you might experience in your own life, at the root, we're all connected to the same stuff. We're all made of the same stuff, and our history is the same history. I'm glad you're here, Junior Popo. I'll be posting very soon, I promise. Jaya Jayarati Vina Vinayaka Vina Vinayaka Shri Ganesha Jaya Jayarati Subramanya Subramanya Kartikeya Jaya Jayarati Venugopala Venugopala Venuola Papa Vidura Navanita Chora Jaya Jayarati Venkantaramana Venkantaramana Sankataharana Sita Rama Radhe Shama Jaya Jayarati Gauri Manohara Gauri Manohara Bhavani Sankara Samba Sadashiva Uma Maheshwara Jaya Jayarati Raja Rajeshwari Raja Rajeshwari Tripura Sundari Mahalakshmi Mahasaraswati Mahakali Mahashakti Jaya Jayarati Anjaneya Anjaneya Hanumanta Jaya Jayarati Dattatreya Dattatreya Trimutraya Vatara Jaya Jayarati Adityaya Adityaya Bhaskareya Jaya Jayarati Sanistaraya Sanistaraya Bhaskaraya Jaya Jayarati Sankaracharya Sankaracharya Advaita Gurave Jaya Jayarati Sadgurunata Sadgurunata Shivananda Jaya Jayarati Vishnu Devananda Vishnu Devananda Vishnu Devananda Jaya Jayarati Agastya Munaye Agastya Munaye Shriyama Priyaye Jaya Jayarati Ayappa Samine Ayappa Samine Dharma Shastave Jaya Jayarati Jesus Gurave Moses Gurave Buddha Gurave Jaya Jayarati Muhammad Gurave Guru Nanak Gurave Samastya Guru Namaha Jaya Jayarati Venugopala. Natatra Suyabati Natandrakaratam Nima Vidyobati Kutaya Magni Trameva Bantaman Bandi Sarvam Dasya Basya Samidam Vivanti Om Yange Kaimune Kaiva Govari Saraswati Narmade Siddhika Veriya Namastitam Namo Namaha Tvameva Mata Trapita Tvameva Tvameva Bandisha Saka Tvameva Tvameva Vidya Dravinam Tvameva Tvameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva Kayena Vacha Manasendriyarva Buddhyat Manava Prakrite Sabhavad Karomi Adyad Mangalam Parasmahi Narayana Iti Sarmar Payami Sarvadamam Pravichayam Amikam Saranam Vrija Aham Sva Sarva Papayo Mokshayami Masucha. Whatever actions I perform with my body, speech, mind, senses, my nature, my intellect, or my emotions, all these, I dedicate to you. And now we will say Kaddish. Kaddish as a prayer of mourning, right? So how did those ancient gods mourn? Through self-harm, right? I don't necessarily recommend that you cut your cheeks with a knife or rend your clothes, cover your loins with sackcloth, rake your arms with a reed, plow your chest like a garden. No, we don't typically admonish those kinds of behaviors of public grief, of violent grief in today's world. Perhaps for good reason. But nonetheless, we still have the need to mourn, because there is still suffering in the world, and there will always be suffering in the world, and has always been. And so, for the last 2,500 years, my ancestors, whose ancestors wrote these stories, my ancestors have been saying Kaddish, to mourn for the dead, and to try to relinquish their grief. And the words, in Hebrew, yes, sound like this. Yitkadav, Yitkadash, Shemei Rabba, B'yama Divrachite, B'yamlich Malchite, B'chayachon of Yamechon of Chayediko Be Israel, Bagala, Vizman Kari Vimru, Amen. Yehe Shemei Rabba, Mivarach Lialam, Olmei, Olmaya, Yitbarach, Vishtabach, Vitbar, Vitrman, Vitnase, Vitadar, Vitale, Vitalal, Shemei, de Kudisha, Berechu, Le'elam min kol birchata v'shirta, tush birchata v'nechemata, Diamiran B'yama Vimru, Amen. Yehi Shlama Rabba Min Shemaya V'chayim Aleinu V'yochol Yisrael V'imru Amen. Osei Shalom V'imrama Huya Aseh Shalom Aleinu V'yochol Yisrael V'imru Amen. Osei Shalom V'imrama Huya Aseh Shalom Aleinu V'yalechol Yisrael V'imru Amen. And that is all the prayer that I have for you today. Thank you so much for being here with me today. I feel very lucky that I get to spend this time with you all. I'm hungry. I'm gonna get some buckwheat and come over here and eat it with you, and we can chat. You can tell me a little bit about your life, and I'll tell you a little bit about mine. It'll be a nice time. So I'll be back in 45 seconds or so. The birds are happy today. Yeah. It's warm. It's finally warm. I'm so grateful. Kimmy, how long have you been in isolation? It's a really hard thing that our society does. Really hard. It's hot. Since Friday afternoon. Oh gosh. Good morning, Jen. How are you? Poor girl. I'm sure she wasn't thrilled. I'm doing okay today. Today I get to film and edit TikToks for the first time in a while. And, I'm looking forward to it. Did she have plans that you have to cancel? You're on day 10 of poison ivy. Gosh, that must have been a really bad case. Where did you get poison ivy? It's, boiled buckwheat. It's pretty boring. It's basically just, carbohydrate mush. A weekend at Grandma's. I bet Grandma was disappointed. Good morning. From South Africa. Wow. The world is wild. I get to talk to people all over the world. It's nuts. How's the weather in South Africa? I bet it's getting colder, huh? Today, I'm going to edit a dumpster film. I probably won't finish it. But I'm going to film another film for my students, because I have students. My class starts in a week. In 1 week. Well, 9 days. My class starts. So I need to make some content for my students. And then I'm going to edit a dumpster TikTok. It is a date that I've been into. I have dates in my room. Southern West Virginia. It's not just Virginia, it's the south part of the west part. You just finished tilling the garden and making potato soup. From potatoes you grew in your garden? Well, because it's winter for you, right? Winter's coming very soon. I guess it's autumn for you. The potatoes came from dumpstering. That's great. No, the potatoes clearly possessed you. I like hearing about other people's dumpster hauls. That's pretty cool. Thank you, Alfie. I still don't know how to spell potato. I spell it wrong all the time. I was making a video about how to propagate sweet potatoes recently, and I spelled it wrong in the script every single time. It was kind of dumb, but I just don't care to spell. You're in Alberta and at the H&W produce store. Their dumpsters always full to the top? Or are you walking through the grocery store watching my live stream with headphones in your ears? Looking at all of the abundant shelves. Yes, in North America we produce food waste. It's true. It's very true. Yeah, I mean, grocery stores are very wasteful. Oh, really? Wow, Courtney. That's really cool. It's a dense book, right? Like Raphael Patai, he's a historian's historian, right? Like the book reads like a very long list of things. Like it's not a page turner, but it is the most high fidelity information about Canaanitic polytheism that I have access to, or that I've encountered. And I learned quite a lot from that book. So I hope you enjoy it. All right. Well, it's time for me to get started on my day. But as always, I had a really lovely morning with you all. And thanks for being here. I'll see you tomorrow. Sid, I live in New York, but I'm gonna go now.